Hi, I'm Zane Darden. Welcome back to the Dr. Yum Project Kitchen, where today we're here with another episode of Cooking on Your Own for the first time. Today we're going to be taking a grocery tour with Dr. Yum Project's Registered Dietitian and the editor of this series, Sarah Moran.
Hey everybody!
Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I am the dietitian for the Dr. Yum Project. So, I do a lot of the work with the nutrition analysis on the website and recipe development and all that, as well as our education stuff. And now I've also become video editor for the videos. So, we're just adding new things all the time and adjusting to this new way of doing things. But yeah, I'm excited. Today we're going to be talking about some grocery shopping tips as well as some label reading stuff. So it should be fun and hopefully helpful for you watching at home.
So when learning to cook for yourself, what do you think is the most important thing to keep in mind?
I think the biggest thing is knowing the different parts of a meal or snack, because when you have in mind like the different parts you need to have, it really helps you to just kind of have that checklist in your mind. So the main 4 things you want to have in any meal or snack are carbs, fats, protein, and fiber. So those are the 4 things: carbs, fat, protein, fiber. And you want to have something that hits each of those categories. And when you do that, you get a meal or snack that is nutritionally balanced. It's got different flavors and textures going on, and it's going to be overall satisfying. And so when you can apply that to your meal planning, that's a great way to get started. And we do have an episode on meal planning, so if you missed that, definitely go check it out. We'll have it linked for you. But if you're doing your meal planning, thinking about those different categories for each meal or snack, then you can make your grocery list, go grocery shopping, and it just makes your grocery shopping way more efficient and just a lot easier.
So Sarah, you were talking about carbs, fat, protein, and fiber. Can you give us some examples of foods that fit into these categories?
Sure. So the first thing to know is that one food could fit into multiple categories. So you can remember that one food might serve a few different purposes. But we do have a handout that breaks all of this down: the carbs, fat, protein, and fiber, how you pull a meal together, and also different examples of foods that fit in those categories. So that will be linked for you below the video so you can get it there and see the longer list. But I'll give a few examples right now. So for carbs, that's going to be things like wheat, oats, rice, corn, potatoes, sweet potatoes, beans and lentils, as well as peas. Fats are going to sometimes they come kind of packaged in with the food. So an egg already has fat in it in the yolk. Meats usually have some fat already kind of in there, but it could also be fats that you add. So it might be some diced avocado, or it could be a drizzle of olive oil on a salad. Protein comes from meats, chicken, poultry, eggs, cheeses, beans, lentils, nuts, and seeds. And then fiber is mostly going to come from fruits and vegetables, but you can also get some from beans and lentils as well as whole grains.
So let's talk grocery stores. When you're out on your own for the first time, grocery shopping can be a big responsibility, but we're going to talk about a couple of tips that can kind of ease this responsibility and make it a little bit more digestible. So one of the first things I would recommend is finding your new local store, which is a totally different grocery store than probably the one you grew up with, and just walking around and getting a sense of where stuff is. So in most grocery stores, you're probably greeted by the produce section first. Sarah, do you have a couple of tips about what you should be thinking about when you're looking through the produce section?
Sure. So you're absolutely right. Produce section is normally first when you come in the store. And that is one good thing. Like, even if you're going to a store that's new to you, they usually have the same general layout, but it might just be kind of figuring out where some specific things are. So it is a good idea to scope it out. But when you're coming into the produce section, one thing is that a lot of produce sections now right at the front will have a lot of pre-chopped or like spiralized, sliced, somehow prepared vegetables. And so those are things to be aware of, because they can be a help when you need to pull something together quickly because it cuts out that chopping. But they also a lot of times are a lot more expensive for what you get. So that's a budgeting thing. And also because they're pre-cut, they're going to go bad more quickly because there's just more surface area for everything to start to break down. So those prepped things can be great in a pinch and can be a time saver, but they can also cost you more money. So you just have to think about what's going to work best for you and kind of figure that out. I personally prefer to get the whole stuff most often because it's just generally going to taste better. It's going to last longer in your fridge, and it is a little bit cheaper. But I always think, there's no exact right or wrong way to do this. It's all about thinking about your specific situation and what's going to work from you. And your situation can change even from day to day or week to week. So you really have to figure out what's going to work for you. Also, in the produce section, I always encourage people to look up and down and around, because a lot of times if we're used to cooking with the same things, especially if we're a new cook, we kind of know where the few things are that we always use. And it's a great idea to just broaden your view a little bit and look at all the different stuff that's there, because there are things that can just make your meals more enjoyable because it's bringing in different flavors. It also is going to help as far as nutrition goes because you're getting a mixture of different things. But also you might find something that is a little bit cheaper or maybe is on sale this week that you can try and incorporate, and it can save you some money that way too. So you definitely want to be looking around and not kind of just zoning in and getting in your kind of loop of the same things you get every time. Something else to remember though with the produce section is while fresh fruits and vegetables are great and we love them and they can add a lot to our meals, you don't want to forget about your canned and your frozen produce. We want to have a mixture of fresh, frozen, and canned because it gives us the most possibilities. So fresh produce is great when you want like something super fresh and crunchy, but it is going to be a lot of times more expensive on average than the frozen or canned counterparts. With the fresh, you have a lot more options with what you can do with it. So that's the real benefit there. Frozen stuff, it's great as far as nutrition goes because it's frozen right when it's picked. So all those nutrients are locked in there. And it's a great convenience item because you can just have it in your freezer when you need it. And if you haven't made it to the store or you just need that next little thing, maybe you need to hit the fiber part of your meal and you don't have a fresh thing that can do that, being able to pull something out of the freezer is wonderful. But the downside with the frozen stuff is that you can't use it in as many things because it's frozen. It can get kind of mushy. So you can't like roast with it, for example, but it could be great to throw in a soup or a casserole. And then with the canned stuff, canned things are great because they're going to last the longest. They don't need any electricity or anything. They're shelf stable. They're very affordable. And it's always good to have those things in your pantry, again, for the convenience, similar to the frozen stuff, but also because if the power goes out or something happens, we always want to have those shelf stable items there in our pantry just to kind of get us through any patches or if we haven't been to the store or whatever. So having that mix of fresh, frozen, and canned is really going to be the best way to go when it comes to your produce.
So I noticed in most grocery stores that I go to that there are some other items other than produce in the produce section. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So a lot of times you can find some different things in produce that kind of get lumped in there. A big one is salad dressing. There may be some on the shelves, but a lot of times there's some there in the produce section as well. The big thing when you're shopping for salad dressing is you want to make sure that there's some kind of fat in there. A lot of times when people are thinking about eating healthier, they think that means they should cut fat out. But like we talked about earlier, fat is an important part of any meal or snack. So you want to look for a salad dressing that has fat in it, and you can find that on the ingredients list. You can also make your own salad dressing. So we do have a video featuring a much younger Zane.
4 years ago, Zane.
Talking about how to make your own salad dressing. So we'll have that linked for you too. But that's a great thing you can do. And it allows you to customize your dressing, which I think is really cool. In our store, we also had tofu in that section near the salad dressing. So things like that might be there if you're looking for those things. They can kind of end up a lot of places, but in the produce section is one place where something like tofu might be. And then when we're coming out of the produce section, a lot of times usually you end up with the cheeses and the hummuses and stuff like that, which we refer to those things as yummify ingredients. They're kind of those flavor booster things that you can add to a meal that add like a big punch of flavor and really take your food to the next level and really make it taste good. So you don't want to overlook those. Thinking about how you can add flavor to your meals is always important, and things like that, especially where a little bit can go a long way, is really, really great to keep in mind. Yeah,
so I noticed when you're grocery shopping, going around the outer rim tends to have some of like the fresher ingredients. And I like shopping there. It has usually like the refrigerated spaces. Do you have any other tips for like navigating the grocery store?
Right. So as you're thinking about your path through the store, again, every store is different, but there are some kind of typical ways that things are laid out. So you're right. A lot of the fresh ingredients are around that outside edge. So when you're looking for those things, that's where you can find them. So if you're kind of starting in produce and moving your way around, then usually after the cheese and all the Yumify stuff, you're going to end up in the meat department. That's kind of next. And so with the meat department, there are a few things to keep in mind there. You can go to the meat department for kind of convenience items, like a rotisserie chicken is a great example of a convenience item that's also usually pretty affordable and can be that kind of thing to help you get a meal on the table. And especially if you are on your own for the first time and it's just you that you're cooking for, then something like that can really go a long way. You can get a few meals out of the meat on the chicken, but then you can also use the bones to make a broth. So something like that can really get stretched a long way, especially if you're cooking for one. But the meat department is also going to have, your kind of butcher seafood kind of counter usually, and that is a really great resource. A lot of people don't realize how helpful that store employee can be, because they can answer a lot of questions for you, especially as a new cook. If you're kind of not sure what you're looking at, they can help you with that. But they can also do custom cuts for you if you're not seeing something that you need, or they can get you a smaller portion. So especially if you are cooking for a smaller number of people, being able to go there and get the exact amount you need, make sure you're not wasting food. But it can also help save you some money too, because then you're only buying exactly what you want to buy. I will say though, there's one thing to really remember about that section is not to overlook the frozen meat options as well, because those can be a lot more affordable and they work great. And especially with seafood, a lot of times if you're looking at the fresh seafood counter, you'll see a little note under those things that says like thawed from frozen. So it was just frozen and they pre-thawed it, and now you've got to use it faster because it's going to go bad, and you end up paying a little bit more for it usually. So if you go to the frozen section for something like shrimp, it's great because it's going to be a little bit cheaper. It's always going to be there in your freezer when you need it, and you can pull out exactly the amount you need. It thaws really quickly, so that's a great thing to have around. And also canned meats are great too. Canned fish, canned chicken. If you do eat meat, having those canned items around, same as with the produce, it's just another thing to have that's going to be affordable and convenient, and it's going to be shelf stable and be there when you need it.
Do you have any advice for new cooks that are wanting to experiment with flavor?
That's a great question. So flavor is a really important part of your food. And a great way to try new flavors is with different herbs and spices. Now, the thing with herbs and spices is a lot of times for a new cook, if you're looking at a recipe and you see all these spices, it can feel a little overwhelming and like, oh, there's all this stuff. And they can be expensive too. So I think it's really good to just kind of build your collection of herbs and spices step by step. Don't feel like you have to rush out and buy every spice and every single thing. Start with maybe some flavors that you already really like. And then as you make new recipes that need new things, you can get one here, one there, and start to build that collection. And then as you do that, when it is time to cook, you're going to have so many more options because you'll have all of that stuff just there waiting for you. I think garlic powder is a really good kind of staple one if you're not sure what to do. Salt, pepper, and garlic powder can go a long way to make things taste good. And another thing to remember is that herbs and spices are important for meats and other proteins, but they're really important for vegetables too.
Totally.
A lot of times what we see at the Dr. Young Project when we're working with different classes and stuff is that people are used to taking a lot of time and paying a lot of attention to how they season different meats, whether it's different spice rubs or marinades or different ways to flavor those things or prepare them the exact right way. But the produce, especially the vegetables, are kind of an afterthought.
Oh, yeah.
And then people are disappointed when they don't taste great. But it's because they need that same love and care that the meat gets a lot of times for people when they're cooking. So making sure that you're using herbs and spices, as well as other flavor boosters like citrus, to bring in flavors with your food, and make sure you're doing that with your produce too. And as far as shopping goes, a big thing with the herbs and spices to think about too is that they do show up in a lot of different spots in the store. So you want to look around and see, in one place you might find a really large container. In another section of the store, you might find a smaller container. Depending on your needs, one of those might be better for you, one might be a better value, but if you only need a little bit, then maybe you want the smaller package. Also, the prices can be really different. So sometimes you'll see spices in the baking section, but then there'll also be their kind of own spice section, or maybe in the international aisle, there will be a whole other section of spices. So really looking around the store, comparing your options and getting, the amount that's going to be right for you, but also seeing if maybe just getting a different brand or getting it from a different section of the store can save you some money.
Yeah, when I go through the grocery store, I see spices all over the place. But another food that I see everywhere are nuts and seeds. I see them in like almost every aisle, fitting into all these different categories. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so nuts and seeds do fall into that same situation where they seem to be everywhere. You'll see them kind of in the produce section, and I think that's because they're thought of as like a topper for salads or something like that. But they can be in the baking section. They can be in the snacking section. They can be all over the store. So that's another thing you want to look around for and see, because again, there might be different sizes of containers that are going to be right for you. Maybe you just need a little bit, when you're baking, for example.
They have like small bags, and then you can just do stuff that's on the top without having to buy like a big bin.
Right, but if there's something you eat a lot of, maybe you want that big bin, or maybe it's a much better value to get that larger size, or again, a different brand or a different packaging. If it's sold as kind of a pantry item versus if it's sold as a snack food, can make the price really different. So you want to be looking around, and this is something you kind of have to do the work on a lot at the beginning when you're getting used to a new store, and especially as a new cook. But once you get it kind of figured out, you start to learn where things are, what's the better price, and you start to get a feel for those things over time.
So now that we're talking about going up and down the aisles and a lot more packaged foods, I know one thing that I struggle with is interpreting these nutrition labels and looking through all of the information there. Do you have any advice on how to evaluate some of this nutrition info?
Yes, so nutrition labels can be really helpful, but they can also be really confusing. And I a lot of times see people often don't look at them at all, or they're looking at them, but they're looking at them for a really long time, which shows me that maybe people don't know how to look at them, because they can be kind of complicated. So there's a few different sections of the nutrition label. I think the first one that's easiest to understand is just the ingredients list. So that's a great place to start, just to see what actually is in a food. That can be helpful if you're comparing two products, but also if you're looking for specific allergens or things like that. And it's important to know that those ingredients are listed from the highest weight to the lowest weight in that product. So whatever you see first is what there is the most of in the product. And as you go down the list, it's less and less and less and less and less. So that's the first place to start. Then when you're actually looking at the numbers and values, it's not super helpful to look at a single product and just look at its label unless you already know you have a specific nutrition need.
Gotcha.
So like if you have to watch your sodium because of a medical condition or something like that, then that can be helpful to look at those numbers and see. One thing that's really nice is the percent daily value that runs up and down the side, because just seeing that something has so many milligrams of sodium, that doesn't really mean a lot. And I don't expect people to have those numbers memorized of how much they should have of every nutrient. I don't have those numbers memorized for how much you should have of every single nutrient. And that's my job. So I don't have it memorized, and you definitely don't need to have it memorized. So those percent daily values show you how much that product has as a percentage of what you should have for the whole day. So if it says 5%, then that's 5% of what you need of that nutrient for the day. If it's 50%, then it's 50% of what you need for the day. And of course, these are general numbers for the average person. So if you have a specific need, then you want to take that in mind. But looking at those percent daily values can be really helpful. And then again, when we're talking about comparing products, that is really where that top part of the nutrition panel is helpful too, because you can look at one product and look at another and see how are they measuring up. So talking about sodium, for example, if you're looking at two products, you can see which one has more sodium, which one has less sodium. Especially if you're looking at like cans of vegetables, you can look at the regular canned corn, the low sodium canned corn, and the no salt added canned corn. And you can see the difference there between the sodium. So being able to compare is really a great way to use the nutrition label. And sugar is another one that a lot of people are looking at, especially added sugars. And same thing, it's really nice when you're comparing products. So when we're talking about yogurt, for example, that's a common one that can have no added sugars, or it could have a lot of added sugars, just depending on what you're looking at. So when you think about yogurt, it's going to have naturally occurring sugars that are just in the milk and they're there. So that wouldn't be an added sugar because it's already in there. But then if you're thinking about flavored yogurt, you might have some fruit in there that's bringing in some natural sugars. Then there also might be sugars added. So especially when we're talking about flavored yogurts, you could compare 2 different blueberry yogurts. And if they have the same amount of total sugar, but one has a lot more added sugar, then you know that sugar is coming from stuff added rather than from the blueberries that are in there.
Gotcha.
For example. So really using those labels to compare products or look for specific things that you already know that you need depending on your specific needs.
All right, Sarah, well, thank you so much for coming here and helping us today. I know that some of these tips were super helpful for me. Like me being a vegetarian, I cook a lot with vegetables, and I want to make vegetables the star of my dish. So I use a lot of spices. And not having my spice cabinet is something that really scares me. So taking this tip of just taking one spice every time I go around and starting with the ones I use and branching out is something that I never thought of. Everyone out there, can you please, if you want to share this video, like, comment, subscribe. The more that you share, the more people that we can reach and hopefully help with some of these tips. Comment if you have any other ideas for the series, if you have any ideas for any other series. You can also follow us on Facebook. You can follow us on Instagram as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you here next time. Bye.
Bye.